This story is translated from French and recorded with the help of our Story to Action lab partners PCR Foundation in Goma.
When the war came and the city fell, the first shock was when they cut the internet connection. One day later, they also cut the electricity. Then, the water was cut as well. Goma became like a death zone. With a child, it is even harder. She must eat, she must study, she has daily needs. I do everything I can, but it is not easy being a single mother in this city.
Have you ever paused and wondered what life in Goma felt like before the gunshots? Before the smoke? Before the endless fear became part of the air people breathe? And now, with the war touching everything from the price of food to the rhythm of people's hearts, you may find yourself asking a deeper question. How does a single mother survive here? How does she build a life, raise a child, and hold her hope together when the world around her keeps falling apart? That is where Lucille's story begins in part 2. This is Lucille's arrival. This is her settlement. This is Goma through the eyes of a single mother who refused to break.
D'accord. À Goma, je vis précisément dans la commune de Goma.
I live in Goma, in the commune of Himbi, on Avenue de Goma. My neighborhood is rather calm, a place where everyone lives their life without interfering in others' lives. The city is divided into communes, communes into neighborhoods, and neighborhoods into avenues. That's how it is organized. I live in a rented house, just me and my daughter. This is the same place where I lived when I first arrived in Goma. I haven't moved since January 2024, when I first came. I pay the rent every month, along with other expenses like water, electricity, and anything else we need. When the war began, I stayed inside the house with my child. We locked ourselves inside to hide. The war came unexpectedly. When the shootings began, we closed ourselves in, trying to stay safe. After the clashes, the problems became worse, especially for us journalists. It turned into a manhunt. They needed to identify journalists and force us to work with them. Once our houses were identified, we had to hide elsewhere until the danger passed. Eventually, I left my home and went to stay with a friend in another part of the city, farther away on the outskirts. I stayed there for 4 weeks. After those 4 weeks, I spent days at her place but returned home at night to check if there was any suspicious movement. That lasted another week before I came back to my home fully. The distance between our houses was far, not really inside the city, and I had to use buses and motorcycle taxis to go back and forth. Each trip cost money, and since I was staying with her, I also contributed to her household. I came to Goma on my own. No one helped me. When the airport in Butembo was still functioning, I traveled by air, with a stopover in Bunia. The trip took about 1 hour and 10 minutes. When I arrived at the airport in Goma, I took a taxi to reach the house where I now live. Before coming, I left Butembo because of a personal conflict. My first days in Goma were frustrating. Everything was new, and I knew no one. If I had the possibility to return to Butembo, I won't consider it. The reason I left is not resolved, and the situation is worse here in Goma. Even the airport is closed now. My family is still there, but I cannot go back.
En fait, comme je l'ai dit, quand je suis arrivée à Goma, je suis arrivée dans la maison, enfin, dans la maison familiale. Et c'est là que
When I arrived in Goma, I came straight into a rented family house. That is where I still live today. The house was empty. There was nothing inside. There were no windows. There was absolutely nothing. So I began, little by little, to repair and set up the house, and to occupy it with the very limited means I had. I had to find beds, buy water, buy all the basic things you need to live in this city. In Goma, you have to pay for water and for almost everything else you need. That is how I began my first week, very timidly. At first, you don't know anyone. You have to depend entirely on yourself. You can't ask anything from anyone because there is no father, no mother, no brother, no sister. It is just you, only you. The owner of the house is not here in Goma. He is in Butembo. It is just my child and me living on this plot. In the beginning, we agreed that the money I was supposed to give him as rent, together with everything I invested to improve the house, would allow me to stay for the first 3 months. After those 3 months, I began paying monthly rent, as I still do today. For someone arriving in Goma for the first time and looking for a house, there are 2 possibilities. Either you identify the owner yourself and contact the landlord directly, or you go through commission agents. Commission agents are people in the city who know the houses and the owners, and who can act as intermediaries between you and the landlord. Once you agree on the contract, you accept the house and communication begins. They then put you in contact with the owner. If the owner is not in town, he gives you a number, either a bank account or a phone number, where you have to deposit the rent each month. As for me, I had already identified the owner before arriving in Goma, but his house was not yet finished. When I arrived, I realized it was not a fully built house. So I started doing the work myself to make it at least a bit habitable. Normally, the owner should be the one to do this, but his house was not even on the rental market yet. I am the one who asked him to let me live there. He told me, "My house is not finished yet, but if you think you can live there, it's fine. Use the money you would have paid as a guarantee and as rent to improve the house first." And after that period, we started the regular rent payments. To settle in Goma, I was helped by the church next to my house. There were members, women, acquaintances, who helped me settle in and showed me around. I didn't know the city at all. I didn't know my way around, and their support continues up to today. At the very beginning, when I first arrived, I was not welcomed by anyone. It was only later, after I discovered the church and began to attend, that people started to get to know me. My first days, honestly, were lonely. Today, I am still part of this church. I serve in the media unit. As I said, I am a journalist, a camera woman, and a photographer. I help in the media department with my skills, and it is there that I met the pastoral couple who have supported me. When I first came to Goma, I came alone because my daughter was still in school. It was the middle of the school year, and I did not want to destabilize her. She joined me months later, around June or July, accompanied by my mother. Even though I had left Butembo in a very difficult financial situation, I wanted her to come so she could be with me and continue her studies here. Living as a woman and mother in Goma is not easy at all. The living conditions do not allow life to be simple. When you cannot meet basic needs, it is not because you are lazy, but because of the economic situation of the city. As a mother, sometimes I feel powerless when there are needs I cannot meet, even though they are my responsibility. My child is still a minor, so she cannot help me earn money. Under Congolese law, a minor is not allowed to work. She cannot be a source of income. Apart from studying and eating, she has no other activity. She can help with household chores, to learn responsibility since she is a girl, but not more than that. In terms of documents, I have a passport and a voter's card. When I was in an area controlled by rebels, I could not use my passport because it shows journalist as my profession. If I showed that, I risked being arrested or harassed. So I traveled only with my voter's card, which is considered an identity card where we live.
D'accord. La vie à Goma, c'était une vie paisible, je peux le dire comme ça, même s'il n'y a jamais...
Life in Goma used to be a peaceful life. Even though life was never truly easy, it was still a good life. Goma is a tourist city, a very, very beautiful city, among the most beautiful in the country. There are hills, lakes, parks, and everything someone might come to visit. Before the war, money circulated easily. Many international organizations were here, giving people work. In short, before the war, there was life in Goma, real life. But after the war began, when the rebels took the city, we stopped living. We only survived. Everything stopped. Many civil servants lost their jobs. The banks closed. The airport closed, even though the airport brought in so much money through commerce and travel. After the war, there is no life. We are simply here, hanging on with whatever strength we have. What I can say about Goma today is that the atmosphere that once existed is gone. There are no tourists, no travelers, no movement at the airport. That part of life is dead. Commercial activity has disappeared. Money rarely circulates. People walk as if distracted, traumatized by what they experienced during the clashes. Many people who once worked in NGOs lost their jobs and now stay at home. The vibrant movement that once filled the streets no longer exists. You cannot even walk at night anymore. Rights and freedoms are violated. We cannot speak freely, especially about certain topics. As a journalist, I am supposed to inform, alert, and warn. But we have been deprived of these rights. They want us to speak only according to their version, not according to the reality we see. Before saying anything, you must first ask for their approval. After the city fell into rebel hands, I produced a show on my YouTube page. In that show, I spoke openly about the suffering the population was going through. After that, I was pursued by the mayor's office, the police, and the army. For the second time, I had to flee my home and hide elsewhere. When I finally met an intermediary, he told me, "Never again speak about political or security issues. If you want to speak, speak only about social matters, but never about the war, never about security, never about politics." Since that show, I have not produced another, out of fear. The rebels are still circulating. The crisis is such that they rule as absolute masters. Recently, I witnessed something I cannot even describe. A scene where a human being was treated like an animal. It was like watching someone slaughter a chicken. That is when I understood. These are rebels, moving freely, doing whatever they want. Today, there are no gunshots because there is no opposition. They are alone. They will not shoot themselves. Before, there was fierce opposition. Many armed actors, police, and military forces resisting them. When the rebels took the city, they released all the prisoners, including criminals transferred from other cities. There were terrible nighttime incursions. People were killed, houses were burned, and for 4 months we lived in terror. Every day I wondered if I would wake up alive. But later, in their own way of governing, they pacified the city, and the gunfire stopped. During the war, I never stayed in a refugee camp. When things calmed down a little, I walked through the city to see what had happened. The city smelled of death. There were corpses everywhere, bodies decomposing for a week even on the roads. The morgue was overwhelmed. It was a traumatic experience that still stays with me. Today, there are no refugee camps in Goma. When the rebels arrived, they destroyed the camps, saying they were hiding criminals. The displaced people scattered, some into host homes, others into schools, others into churches. The camps no longer exist.
Ce que je venais de dire que, comme je suis photographe, je suis photographe, par moment j'ai des amis qui me contactent pour des activités de mariage et autres, ou soit pour des activités où ils ont besoin que je fasse.
When the war came and the city fell, the first shock was when they cut the internet connection. We didn't know what was happening. We couldn't even communicate with someone who lived just next door. One day later, they also cut the electricity. There was no power. The entire city was in darkness. Then the water was cut as well. Goma became like a death zone. People no longer knew how to get clean, drinkable water. Now, power and water work again. But something strange happened. They say they came to liberate the city. But when they restored electricity and water, they doubled, even tripled the bills. Before, I could pay water and electricity with difficulty, but it was possible. Today, the amounts are simply unaffordable. The money I pay for rent goes to the landlord, of course. But water and electricity are controlled by state companies, Régie for water and the National Company for Electricity. And now it is the new de facto government that decides the amounts. They doubled the prices and there is nothing we can do. Managing these new expenses is extremely difficult. Even essential needs like food have become very expensive. The price of everything has increased. Flour, oil, meat, vegetables. Transportation too. Before, taking a motorcycle taxi cost a small amount. Today, it is nearly triple. With a child, it is even harder. She must eat, she must study, she has daily needs. I do everything I can, but it is not easy being a single mother in this city.
Les droits humains n'ont jamais été respectés en 100% du monde.
Human rights have never been respected 100% anywhere in the world. But before the war, there was at least the minimum. If you had a problem with someone, you could go and complain, even against someone of higher social rank. If a soldier harmed you, you could go to the appropriate military authority, file a complaint, and sometimes the soldier would even be questioned or punished. Today, under domination, things are completely different. If rights were respected at 50% before the war, now we are below average. They are simply not respected. Even if a soldier did something to you, you do not have the right to speak. You cannot complain. Human rights are violated under this domination. As for me personally, I have never been a victim of harassment or violence as a woman. The restrictions I face are because I am a journalist, not because I am a woman. So in my own case, I have not experienced sexual violence. But sexual violence in our region is a reality. The rebels use fear and terror as tools of domination. Harassment and violence are weapons they use in the areas they control. Recently, a friend who lives near the big markets told me that women came to him saying they were being raped and harassed unexpectedly from one day to the next. He wrote a report to our hierarchy so we could inform the organizations responsible for protecting women. But little could be done, because those organizations operate in areas not controlled by the rebels. So yes, sexual violence is real. It is one of the weapons used to frighten the population and impose control. The M23 rebels use sexual violence as a weapon of war. As I said, it is one of their tools of domination, a way to demonstrate power in the areas under their control. For the government to protect women and girls, including my own daughter, it would first need to regain control of the areas dominated by rebels. As long as the government has no power there, it cannot act. Once the areas are liberated, it could organize programs to protect the people living there. In short, the government must first establish peace. All these problems are consequences of the war. To end the war, the government must regain control of all territories under rebel domination. It must also ensure justice. Those responsible for rape, violence, and related crimes should be brought to court. Rebels should be expelled from the areas they occupy, and those who committed crimes must be punished. Justice is essential to defending human rights.
Mon travail a changé depuis le début de la guerre parce que je ne me vois pas en train d'exercer mon métier en toute liberté comme il se doit. Donc du coup, même si j'ai des éléments à dire...
My work as a journalist has changed completely since the start of the war. I can no longer exercise my profession freely. Even when I have information, if it concerns politics or security, I cannot speak. I must remain silent for my own safety. This affects my work directly. Being a woman has nothing to do with these restrictions. Before the war, I was already a woman and I could work normally. What changed everything was the domination of the rebels. My first major project in Goma was a documentary under a program called STEP. My task was to identify the basic infrastructure, schools, health centers, offices, neighborhoods, that the government had provided to the population. I covered Goma, 6 territories of the province, as well as Butembo and Beni. The risk was that some of these areas were under rebel control, and we had to cross them to do our work. By God's grace, we managed to complete the documentaries, which were later submitted to the project managers and the World Bank. I received this assignment through a friend I had worked with in Butembo. He connected us to the project managers. That same friend is now in Beni. During the war, he had to return there because the provincial authorities temporarily moved to Beni, and all the agents had to follow. Continuing my career now is extremely difficult. The project I was working on was suddenly suspended, and I lost my source of income. That affected everything: our daily life, our ability to meet even simple needs. One day that marked me deeply was January 26, 2025. Sundays in Goma usually begin with the sound of churches. But that day, everything was silent except the crackling of gunfire. For 2 hours, the shots continued without stopping. Even animals could not go outside. Fear was everywhere. At 2 p.m., the internet was cut, and images of the dead began to circulate on social media. It felt like falling freely between heaven and hell. I was with my daughter. She kept asking me what was happening, and I had no answer. Fear had paralyzed every word. We stayed under the beds, without eating, unable to move. Even today, danger enters our home through other doors. Just 2 days ago, on Friday, my daughter returned from school with a letter saying she would not be allowed into class because of disputes, fees we must resolve. The moment I read the letter, I felt paralyzed. It reminded me of something from years ago. When she was in her first year of preschool, one day she was sent home because I couldn't pay the fees. She looked at me and said, "Mama, did they chase me from school because I don't have a father?" She was 6 or 7 years old. That question stayed in my heart like a wound. I fear hearing it again today. From Monday onward, she will not be allowed into the classroom until I settle the dispute. I look left, right, in front, behind, like the people of Israel, wondering where my help will come from, except God. What keeps me going is knowing that God, who allowed me to have this child and raise her until now, continues to sustain us. She is 10 years old today. I can say I have never had stable support, but God has always done what was needed to keep us alive and give us something to eat, despite everything. That faith is why I managed to get out of bed yesterday. Schools here are either church-run or private. There are no public schools. My daughter goes to a private school, and the fees have not changed, even in war. The rebels maintain control and collect whatever they can. It is risky for her to go to school, yes, but she is not alone. Other children go too. If I kept her home, she would lose the school year. So we take the risk, hoping the situation will change one day.
Alors, ce qui me donne la force d'avancer chaque jour, c'est trois choses. Premièrement, Dieu, la croyance que j'ai, la ferme assurance que j'ai envers Dieu. Deuxièmement, ce sont les épreuves.
What gives me the strength to keep going every day comes from three things. First, God, the faith I have and the strong assurance I carry in Him. Second, the trials I have gone through from the beginning until today. I draw strength from my journey, from everything I have endured, and from the fact that despite it all, I am still here. Third, the goals I set for myself. Whenever I feel lost or overwhelmed, those goals come back to me and remind me, you do not have the right to give up. You must fight to reach what you set for yourself. There is also a person and a community that helps me continue. The person is my daughter. The responsibility I have toward her keeps me standing. And sometimes, when she sees sadness on my face, she looks at me and says, "Mama, it will be okay. It will be fine." Those words give me strength. The community that helps me is my church. My brothers and sisters there, the fathers, the mothers, come to my house to comfort me. The sermons we hear at church also give us the strength to endure whatever comes. That spiritual support is a pillar in my life here. The small moments that give me hope, despite everything that is happening, are moments that show God continues to protect us. We can sleep and wake up. That alone is something to be grateful for in this city. Recently, my mother came to visit us to see how we were living. Her visit gave us courage. Another moment of hope, even if we didn't celebrate it, was when my daughter turned 10 this year and when I turned 35. Her birthday was in April. Mine was in February. Seeing these milestones in the middle of war reminds us that tomorrow can be better than today. Our most urgent needs today are three things for my daughter: her education, her health, and her basic daily needs. And for me, feeding my family, providing for the household, and above all, my need for proper journalism training. I never studied journalism formally. Everything I know, I learned through informal training here and there. I want to deepen my knowledge and obtain an internationally recognized document so I can fully practice this profession I love. These needs affect our daily life severely. Since I received that letter threatening my daughter's access to school, I have been psychologically destabilized. I lost my joy. Even though I try to keep hope, I struggle to sleep. Before, we could eat 2 or 3 times a day. Now, even eating once can be a problem. Even for simple things for my daughter, like doing her hair, she can go 2 or 3 months without going to the salon because I cannot afford it. And when she asks me, "Mama, why can't I go to the salon?" I have no answer. As a Christian, I believe the war will end one day. No matter how long it takes, I know it will end. But the end will not come from a man, or from weapons, or from dialogue. The end will come at the time set by God. I believe the government thinks it is making efforts to end the war, but in my view, those efforts are misdirected. To solve a problem permanently, you must uproot the causes, not just cut the leaves and branches. The government often says the problem is external, but in my view, there are Congolese people who support armed groups because they were marginalized or denied what they were promised. If I could advise the government, I would tell them to prioritize internal dialogue. Bring every political tendency to one table, understand the real internal problems, and address them before looking outward. A country becomes vulnerable when it is weak from within. If the inside is strong, no enemy can enter. If the government focused on internal solutions, I believe the war would have ended long ago. For someone who has never been to Goma, I would explain the conflict this way. The people fighting are those who claim to act according to old agreements. That is where the name of their movement comes from, M23. They tried to take the city in 2012, and this time they succeeded. And beside M23, there is support from elsewhere, including Rwanda, according to several international investigations. This war has changed everything. The economy, culture, finances, tourism, everything has collapsed. Nothing works. During the war, there was massive looting. People lost everything. Families who once lived well became poor. There have been countless losses of life, millions across the region over the years. Even for those who survive, life continues with fear, sickness, and a constant lack of means. It has crossed the lives of more than one person. It has shaken us all.
We often hear about peace agreements signed between the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the government of Rwanda. But for the people who live through the conflict each day, we must ask an honest question. Does this peace reach their homes, their streets, or their hearts? Today, we turn to Lucille. She speaks not only as a journalist, but also as a single mother, living in the middle of these tensions. Through her voice, we step into the everyday reality behind the headlines and the agreements. Here is Lucille's perspective.
Bon, dire qu'il y a eu un accord de paix qui a été signé, je ne sais pas.
If a peace agreement has been signed, I do not know. I cannot say whether that agreement has truly been concluded, but what I do know is that the process is underway. The first thing signed was a ceasefire agreement, but even that has not been respected. There are still attacks here and there. The final peace agreement has not yet been signed. Each side has expressed its own expectations, but nothing has been mutually accepted. There is one agreement that is supposed to be signed in the United States, in Washington, and another that is supposed to be signed under the supervision of Qatar, in Doha. Neither of these has been finalized. More negotiations are still needed before anything becomes real. Even the ceasefire was from 7 months ago, September or October. I would need to verify the exact date. As a believing Christian, I know the war will end one day, no matter how long it takes. But the end of this war will not come through men, nor weapons, nor dialogue. The end will come at the time chosen by God. I believe the government thinks it is making efforts to end the war, but in my opinion, those efforts miss the real problem. To resolve something permanently, you must uproot the causes, not just attack the consequences. It is like cutting leaves or branches instead of pulling out the root. The government says the problem is external, but in my view, some Congolese themselves support the armed groups because they were marginalized or denied what they were promised. If I could advise the government, I would tell them to prioritize internal dialogue, to bring all political tendencies to one table and understand the real internal problems before seeking external solutions. A country becomes vulnerable when it is weak from within. If the inside is strong, no enemy can enter. Today, efforts are misdirected. With a real internal solution, I believe this war would have ended long ago. I always say the cause that drives M23 to take up arms may be real, but the method is wrong. If you have rights to claim, does it require weapons? No. If they changed their method, if they chose a revolution without bloodshed, without foreign actors, without Rwandans, if they truly nationalized their movement, I would even say I might prefer them to rebuild the country. But the method they use is wrong, and they walk with neighbors who are historical enemies of Congo. It is better to be slapped by your own brother than by the neighbor's son. When two children of the same family fight, one father intervenes. But if a child fights with the neighbor's child, now there are two fathers, two authorities, and conflict becomes harder to resolve. That is why we say, it is better to be corrected by your own father than by the neighbor's father. When I think about how the rebels are financed, it becomes a very political topic. But based on published reports, it is Rwanda that financially supports the movement. They provide weapons and ammunition. Some fighters who were found dead wore uniforms with the Rwandan flag. So from what we see, Rwanda is the financial partner. As for politicians who help in secret, I know they exist, but I am not the one who will reveal their names. Those people are known by the population.
Now, let us look closely at the reality of female heads of households in war-affected areas. Why do their voices matter? What surrounds their daily struggle? Many people suffer in conflict zones, but the story of a woman raising children alone carries its own weight, its own fear, and its own strength. To understand this better, we turn to Lucille. Her life as a single mother in Goma gives us a window into a reality many rarely see. Let us step into her experience.
Les frais que je dois payer, d'abord c'est les frais de loyer comme j'ai dit hier.
In my household, everything begins with the rent. That is the first expense I must pay. Then come all the bills I'm responsible for: electricity, water, and the cost of food every single day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are the school fees for my child, and the transportation to take her to and from school, because the distance is very long, and she cannot walk there on foot. I also have all her personal needs to cover: grooming, clothing, everything a child her age requires. And then there are my own needs, from the smallest things to maintaining my hair, my appearance, my basic dignity. In Goma, there is no drinkable water available naturally. We must buy treated water for drinking, and we also must buy water for all other household use. I also pay for waste collection, where I take the garbage. In short, everything related to the household rests on my little head. All of it is on me. Before the war, when I worked as a journalist, taxes and contributions were deducted directly when I was paid. The state institutions took their share automatically. No one came afterward to collect anything. It was already removed at the source. Before the war, I earned money through my journalism, reporting, documentaries, contracts here and there. That was my main source of income. But now, I no longer have any stable income. Only small tasks, occasional services, nothing secure, nothing permanent. There is no real contract, no steady work. People sometimes say that if I had a husband, my life would be different. But I do not believe that. There are women who have husbands, yet suffer more than I do. What would truly change my life is not a husband. It is having a stable, well-paid job. A husband does not guarantee well-being. If he has no money, he becomes another burden. What brings stability is a good job, even if you are alone. Being the sole provider places a heavy weight on me. There is no money, no stable source of income, and being alone and responsible for everything is very hard. Sometimes you forget yourself for the sake of others. There are things you should do for yourself, but you sacrifice them to meet the needs of the household. If there were someone else to contribute, things might balance. But alone, without reliable income, there is total imbalance. My daughter's presence influences my entire life. I must be a role model for her. I monitor my behavior because I am not free to do whatever I want. Before going anywhere, I must make sure there is someone who can stay with her, because she cannot stay alone at home. So I am not as free in my movements as I would be if I were alone. There are no places, like shops or services, that are difficult for me to access because I have a daughter. But there are certain types of work people do not easily give to someone with a child. For example, field work that requires traveling for a week. They always ask, who will the child stay with? In Congolese African culture, having a child outside marriage is looked down upon. In Goma, it is a taboo, though less harsh than in Butembo. Here, people observe you afterward, how you live, how you behave. They give you a second chance to see whether it was a mistake or intentional. But still, single mothers are placed in the same category. Since January, my life has been a constant example of how to be resourceful when you have no resources. Even when everything is missing, food and drinking water cannot be missing. Even with nothing, I must find something so that my daughter can eat. Finding food every day is a real struggle. Before the war, the UN and other organizations offered support programs for single mothers. But now, with all the restrictions, I no longer hear about any such programs. I have never benefited from them. Projects have specific targets. If you do not fit the criteria, you do not benefit. And sometimes, the aid does not match the needs I truly have. What worries me for my daughter's future is that she does not know the word father. It is a rare word in her mouth. She lacks paternal authority. I can play both roles, but I cannot embody a father's authority. This may create an imbalance in her. I do fear that one day she may look for a father figure elsewhere. But with good education and guidance, I hope we can help her understand her worth and make wise choices. Still, I also have hope. My hope is that she already understands that a woman is capable. A woman can do what a man can do. My fear, however, is that she may either give too little value to men or seek a paternal figure elsewhere because of this absence. That is what I carry in my heart.
You've been listening to The Archive Speaks, a podcast from the Refugee Archive, a global center dedicated to preserving and amplifying the voices of displaced female head of households. If this story moved you, help us share it. Support our cause by finding us on any social media platform at The Refugee Archive. And join us, because when more of us listen, more of them speak.